Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. All right. Welcome everyone to this installment of the study of Ezekiel. We're on chapter 27. My name is Steve Sheik, and I'm the congregation leader of Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Katy, Texas. So tonight it's kind of a continuation of what we did last week, because last week we were talking about the prophecies against Tyre. And so this week we're looking at the a lament that God told Ezekiel to make for Tyre. And so let's go down to that. So we're in chapter 27 right now. So that's kind of right here in that section. And here we are talking about here's the places that we're talking about: Tyre, Sidon, and we'll be talking about some places in Mount Hermon, Damascus, and a few other places. I've got some maps for you. So this chapter consists of, and there's a picture of Tyre in 1934, and there it is today. Okay, it can be divided into 4 sections. Now there's 2 sections of prose and 2 sections of poetry, and the Ezekiel composed the poetic parts in a traditional kina or funeral dirge rhythm. Now, of course, that is totally lost when we try to put it onto Facebook, but you just have to take my word for it, okay? That is a funeral dirge, and I don't know either, except that the people who are a lot smarter than me said that it was a funeral dirge. So it's kind of an unusual. This is a very unusual chapter in all of the Bible, and there's really no other chapter in the Bible that's kind of like this. And so sometimes if you're going to understand this, you need to look to understand the ethnology or the various countries that we're talking about. You'd need to look over at Genesis 10. Now, what is Genesis 10? That is the listing of all the descendants of Noah, from Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and their descendants, and what nations came out of Noah and his family. So you'd have to go through that, look at it, and see some of the countries, get a better appreciation of all of that. And then also, if you're going to look at the prophecy side of it, you'd need to look at Isaiah 13 and 14, and also Revelation 18, because they are having to do with prophecies having to do with the destruction of Babylon. Isaiah 13 and 14 talks about the destruction of the ancient Babylon, at that time. And then Revelation 18 then is discussing a future Babylon being destroyed, and that Babylon is probably not, well, I could say it is not the Babylon of old. It is something altogether different, and some people say, well, it's this city or that country or whatever, and I just don't think we know enough about it to point to it, because I've heard people say all over the place that the Babylon is Rome, and others will say, well, no, Babylon is this country or that country, and that the Antichrist is going to be a Catholic pope, stuff like that. So we don't know about that. So, and I think we'll have to get a lot closer to it before we can figure out what the modern day Babylon is going to be that Revelation is talking about. So, all right, any comments or questions on this? Because I'm sure everybody's already read the chapter and studied up on it and looked at all your notes and everything. Any comments or questions?
Charles said there'll be a quiz in 15 minutes.
Well, that'll take me a little bit longer than that. Okay, so Ezekiel 27, 1-3, the word of Adonai came to me saying, you, son of man, lift up a lament for Tyre. Say to Tyre, dwelling at the entrance of the sea, the merchant to the people of many coastlands, thus says Adonai Elohim, Tyre, you said, I am perfect in beauty. Now, this lamentation begins with a picture of the glory of Tyre, its situation, where it's at, its architectural beauty. Evidently, it was quite a gem of architecture. Its military strength. It had a lot of military to protect its merchant ships and defenses. Remember that the Tyre was two parts. It was part of it was on the shore, and then part of it was on that offshore island. And as it turns out, their thoughts about their invincibility were greatly exaggerated in light of how quickly Nebuchadnezzar came through there and destroyed the shoreside part of Tyre. And so the Lord instructed Ezekiel to write a lamentation on Tyre, though in its day, Tyre was renowned for seafaring and commercial leadership in the world. And it wouldn't be but just a few months after this prophecy that all of that would be destroyed. Tyre's neighboring kings sang the first dirge back in chapter 26, and but now it was up to Ezekiel to do a lamentation or a lament here in this chapter. So I think we can say that the destruction of sinners always moves the heart of God, and it should also move the hearts of his spokespeople, the people that tell the world about the good news. We should never take pride or never take joy in the destruction of evil people, because they it's just not a joyous thing that when people are destroyed. So Tyre had a great pride and a conceit in itself. I mean, that's what that says. You think that you're really beautiful. That's what that second verse said. And this is the third verse. And this is another cause of its judgment by God, because, God doesn't like the proud and haughty spirit. And, the old saying, pride comes before the fall. And so, like Jerusalem, Tyre considered itself perfect in beauty. They just thought that their city was the best city around, and it was perfect, and so forth. So that's one of the reasons that Tyre also was singled out for judgment. That and the fact that they had gloated over the fall of Jerusalem. So going ahead, your borders, verse 4, your borders are in the heart of the seas. Your builders perfected your beauty. All your planks have been fashioned from cypress trees of Senir. They took a cedar from Lebanon to make a mast for you. Let's see. And let's see, there it is. They made your oars from Bashan's oak. Of boxwood from the islands of Katim, they made your decks inlaid with ivory. Fine Egyptian linen was your sail, serving as a banner for you. Your awning was blue and purple from the coast of Elisha. So Ezekiel likened Tyre, and it was appropriately enough because it was a seafaring city, and it made all of its money off of maritime trade. So he likened it to a large and beautiful merchant ship, and he used this figure to portray Tyre's pride and her prominence and actually domination as a maritime power. So the earliest Phoenician ships, this is this area, Tyre was on the coast there, and that area was called Phoenicia. The earliest Phoenician ships had about 50 oarsmen, and they were quite fast. Later on, they had much larger commercial vessels, and they weren't so fast, but they could carry a whole bunch of cargo. And they would have a crew up to 200 men with 2 or 3 banks of oars. The ships that were propelled by these guys on the oars. And you've seen pictures of them where they're sitting on the benches, and all these bedraggled old bearded half-naked men with the oars, stroke like that. And so they would have about 200 people, the big ones, the cargo ships. Well, along with sails, it would also have sails, but the sails that they used back in those days were square rigged sails, and so you really couldn't sail very close to the wind. So they would use the renewable resources called galley slaves, and when one of them kicked the bucket, then they'd go find them another one. So that's what they used. So the limits of this ship of state, as it were, was actually the sea itself, and the builders, had made it made Tyre into a magnificent enterprise. I mean, they were making money everywhere. The materials that had gone into its construction, again, using the metaphor of the ship, had been of the finest quality. So the planks that formed the hull of a ship were juniper, probably pine or cypress, something like that, from Mount Hermon area. Now, here's a picture of a cypress from Sinir, and that's up in that mountain range of Mount Hermon, and that is over here. You can see my cursor. You see Dan. Well, then just right up to the right and up from that is Mount Hermon area, and you can see Mount Hermon for a very long way. In fact, you can if I remember right, you can still see Mount Hermon from down here at the Sea of Galilee. And we were there in April, and it had snow on the mountain, and the water was very, very cold as it was melting, and the snow was melting and flowing down the Jordan. So then they also, her rudders or oars were the oaks of Bashan. Now here's Bashan, this area. It's what we would possibly call the Golan Heights today. And even today, it's a very, parts of it here are very good agricultural land. And so there again, here's an oak tree of Bashan. And of course, these oaks are not very big, but they would have to grow a lot taller and so forth to make oars out of them. And it says her decks were covered with let's see, where did it say something about the cypress from the cedar of Lebanon? that the masts were made out of the cedar of Lebanon. Now, how in the world they could make a mast out of that gnarly, crooked wood, I don't know, unless back in the days, 2,500 years ago, that area was much more forested, and the trees by necessity would have had to grow up straight, kind of like a pine forest today, where they're all competing for the sunlight, and that causes them to go, to grow straighter. So, and that's a cedar from Lebanon, and this is the oaks of Bashan. This is over in that would be in Jordan today, and so, all right. Here, so I just, what I did was these references that they had in here. Maybe people wouldn't know where those things were, so I was trying to just kind of let you know where some of this stuff, the Sinir cypress came, I said, from Mount Hermon, and the cedars of Lebanon, of course, they came from Lebanon. Okay, Bashan, that referred to the Golan Heights, what we would call Golan Heights today. And Katim, that is actually the island of Cyprus. And then Elisha is, that's where they got their purple and blue and purple dyes. And so I'm told that would be either also another name for Cyprus or a part of Cyprus, or it could be from someplace in Greece. So we don't really, have a good feel for that. So, but then they would have, and this Elisha, there's others, they say it could be Italy, Sicily, Carthage, Cyprus, or someplace in Syria. All of those were possibilities. So basically, they didn't know where that was. So, okay. I just got a note from my assistant. But I'm going to have to call her back in here with my water, and so she can explain what it is that she's written here. So she'll come here in just a second, because she's got an idea comparing this to the Twin Towers, where they had nameplates on doors from the various nations. So anyway, she's going to Pat's going to come back in here and with a comment here in just a minute. And so let's go. Are there any comments or questions on this so far? Okay, going ahead on verse. Oh no, here she comes. So she can go ahead and read her note and tell.
Okay. I am not dressed to do this, but
well,
okay.
I can I can always turn off the
No, that's okay. I did a study one time on Tyre. It has been years and years ago, and I didn't know he was doing this, so I haven't read up on it. But the city of Tyre, if you can compare it with 9/11 and the Twin Towers, it was also a seaport. It was also the head of commerce from all over the world. The doors on the buildings had plaques from all the various companies from all over the world that they represented. It was devastating when it was taken down, because cities all over the world were, that was their center, okay? And they thought it was invincible. And it said ships out at sea could see it being destructed. See the fire and the destruction of it all. And it was raised all the way to the ground as if it had never been there because of their pride. Okay. I think it's a very good comparison.
Okay.
That we can learn from.
Thank you. Hey, Steve.
Yes,
And-
sir.
And
Hey,
Jonathan,
The,
Jonathan Kahn made something.
Yeah, go ahead.
the 2.5 tribes that were on the other side of the Jordan, half the tribe of Manasseh,
Gad,
Benjamin, and who else was that?
Gad, Reuben, and the half tribe of Manasseh.
Oh, okay. Are they still in Israel, or have they been taken over by another country?
By this time in Ezekiel's time,
No, in our time. Our time.
in our time. Okay, no, that is Jordan and Syria,
Yeah. That's what I
um,
thought, yeah.
except for the Golan Heights when, in the 67 war, the 73 war, I can't remember which, Israel came in and took over the Golan Heights as a buffer zone and as a protection to protect their own agriculture and so forth. So Israel did take that part over, the Golan Heights. And it's funny because the world, they raise all sorts of cane about Israel occupying the West Bank and all that kind of stuff, but they don't really say anything about the Golan Heights where they occupy that. But they did that in war. So I'm just wondering. I'm gonna punch a button here because this Facebook it's not showing me doing any kind of a change, and so I don't know what it's. Okay. Okay. Anyway, it's working now. So, all right. So going ahead, the inhabitants of Sidon and Arvad were your rowers. Your skilled men, Tyre, were on you. They were your sailors. The elders of Gabal and her experts were within you, caulking your leaks. All the ships of the sea with their sailors were with you to trade for your wares. All Persia, Lud, and Put were in your army, our men of war. They hung the shield and helmet in you, and they gave you splendor. Men of Arvad and Helek were all around on your walls, and the Gamadim were in your towers. They hung their shields all around on your walls. They perfected your beauty. So what that means is that strong men from Sidon and Arvad and other neighboring Phoenician towns were the ship's rowers. And again, just think of this. It's not talking about a literal ship. It's talking about a metaphoric ship of state of Tyre. And its pilots were wise men. The Phoenicians were, they were probably some of the best, if not the best sailors in the ancient world. And so the repairmen on board, they were likened to the wise men from the famous elders of Gabal, which is a place of learning in Lebanon. It's called Byblos. And all the other trading peoples that cooperated with Tyre, because why? It was the leading merchant marine power of its day. And we can also look back on it. Where would we find something like that? Well, the United States was a leading merchant marine power. I guess maybe we still are in some aspects, although we don't have ships of our own because our laws and so forth have been so messed up that we just basically regulated ourselves out of power. But a better example would probably been Great Britain. Great Britain, of course, for 200 years was the most powerful nation on the earth, and a lot of it was because of their maritime navy and their merchant marine navy, and the trade that they conducted everywhere. So this description of every detail of this trading vessel represents the city of Tyre. It expressed basically the elaborate opinion that Tyre had of itself, and how that she was matchless. She was the best in the world. It says, I am perfect in beauty. So and so they had famous mercenaries from different lands who participated in the trade of Tyre. Tyre was able to attract warriors to fight and protect her economic army because she was strong and she was rich. The outstanding men of Tyre, of course, were traders and not soldiers, but these foreign soldiers of fortune then came as far away from Persia, which Persia is modern day Iran. Arvad, they talk about Arvad, that's up in Turkey, just above Lebanon on the coast. And you got Lud, which is in eastern Turkey. That was actually Anatolia. And then Put is North Africa, maybe Libya, but it's all over the place as far as the commentators say what that country really was. And the Gamadim, the land of Gamad, I don't know of anybody that has a clue what that was. None of the commentators were going to bite on that one. And they said that when it says they hung their shields on Tyre's walls, that what that means is that they identified themselves with Tyre and they pledged themselves to defend Tyre. That's what hanging their shields on the wall meant. Now, when they translate, there's a name in there. What find it? I think Helek was Helek, Heleck. Helek was a name that they came up with. It's a region. Some translators, the NIV translators, believe that Helek was name of a place somewhere in southeast Anatolia, and it may have been, it would be up there in Turkey someplace. So, but we really don't know. It's just it's one of those that you ask, you find whatever commentator you want, and they'll give you a different one. So some people say it's up there. Others just say that it wasn't a place at all, and that it just meant they translated it as your army. So we don't know. Comment? Anybody? Okay. Going ahead. It says Tarshish was your trading partner because of the abundance of all riches. With silver, iron, tin, and lead, they traded for your merchandise. Javan, Tubal, and Meshach were your traffickers. They gave lives of people and vessels of bronze for your wares. Those from the house of Togarma traded for your merchandise with horses, steeds, and mules. The men of Dedan traded with you. Many coastlands were your customers. They brought you horns of ivory and ebony as your payment. So Tyre's trading partners included Tarshish, which was it's the western end of the Mediterranean Sea. Possibly, we don't know, Spain and maybe Sardinia, and which they traded their coin of the realm. That they had silver and iron and tin and lead to pay for the goods that they could get through Tyre. And then there was a Tartessus city or something called Tartessus in both southern Spain and in Sardinia. So We just don't know what, that Tarshish, Tartessus. So we don't know exactly where Tarshish was. Javan was said to be Greece, and Tubal and Meshach, those were cities within eastern Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. Just in fact, I could probably go back and show you some where that would have been. I think I've got, maybe I don't. I was looking up maps today, so, and I neglected to put that in there. Okay, so so the people of Beth Togarmah, that is Armenia, and they gave mules and horses, and including war horses, for Tyre's wares. That's what they traded. The Dedanites, these people, they lived in Arabia and along the Persian Gulf, or the Gulf of Aqaba, and they traded with Tyre and paid for their merchandise with ivory, tusks, and ebony. So that was their stock in trade. Some translators followed the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew, and they replaced Dedan with Rhodes, which was a Greek Aegean port, because the change only involves changing the vowels on the Hebrew word, and because Dedan appears again in verse 20. So, Hebrew words did not originally have vowels, and so later editors of the Hebrew Bible stuck those in there, in the Masoretic text. And that's why you sometimes have discrepancies in pronunciation of things and interpretation of what things mean. It's not because the Bible is flawed, it's just because our translations are flawed or biased. So going ahead, Aram was your customer because of your abundant goods. They traded for your merchandise with emerald, purple, and embroidered cloth, fine linen, coral, and rubies. Judah and the land of Israel were your customers. They traded for your wares with wheat of Minnith, confections, honey, oil, and balm. Damascus was your customer because of the abundance of your goods and all of your great wealth, with the wine of Helbon and the wool of white. Vedan and Javan from Uzal traded for your wares. Ironwork, cinnamon, spices were bartered for your merchandise. So Syria was one of Tyre's customers and provided her with emeralds, purple, embroidered goods. That's Aram. And they had fine linen, coral, and rubies, and that's what they used for their currency. Judah also traded with Tyre, and they exchanged wheat from Minnith. Minnith is in western Amman, which is in Jordan today, but they had the cakes or confections, honey, oil, and balm for her goods. So the idea of Israel being, the land of milk and honey, well, they were able to use that in trade. Damascus was also found. They found Tyre an attractive trading partner because of her extensive inventory of various products, and they paid for her purchases with wine from Helbon, which is Aleppo, northwest of Damascus. So it's in Syria. And white wool or wool from Zahar, also northwest of Damascus. The Veda, or the Danites, and Javan, or the Javan from Uzal, that was Greeks. There were Greek people living in Uzal. It's an old capital of Yemen in eastern Arabia. They paid for their wares with yarn, wrought iron, cassia, and sweet cane. So going ahead here, Dedan was your dealer in saddlecloth for riding. Arabia and all the princes of Kedar were your favored trading partners in lambs, rams, and goats, and all in these they were your customers. The merchants of Sheba and Rama were your vendors. They traded for your wares with the finest spices, all precious stones and gold. Haran, Cana, and Eden, the merchants of Sheba, Asher, and Kilmad, traded with you. They traded for your merchandise with gorgeous fabrics, garments of blue and richly woven work, carpets of multicolored material with cords twisted and tightly knotted. So Dedan was, they also provided saddle cloths, okay, that you know, I guess what we call a saddle blanket today, but it would be something that you put on the camels and the horses and the mules and so forth to make it easier for the animal to bear their burdens. And then other Arabians and the Arab tribes of Kedar, a nomadic people, well, their payment was with lambs, rams, and goats. And so the traders from Sheba and Rama, these are other areas of Arabia, paid for their wares with spices, precious gems, and gold. Haran in Aramea, you know, remember that's where Isaac went back to find a wife, and where Joseph went up to, Jacob went up to find a wife also. And that's where his uncle lived and cheated him for 14 years. And so Canaan or Calne, and that's in Mesopotamia, that's in that fertile crescent of the Euphrates River. And Eden, that was south of Haran. And Sheba, eastern Arabia. Asher, which is Assyria, just, you know, and Kilmad, which was probably, I mean, the two big choices here, Mesopotamia or Arabia. And we don't know which one that is. They exchanged garments, carpets, and finely crafted clothing materials. It's kind of interesting that those areas of the world back then, even 2,500 years ago, were skilled at things that they still do today, 2,500 years later. You know, the Persian rugs and some of the rugs that that come from that part of the world. Now we have bought some of those things. Nowadays they just run them through machines and duplicate it with ease. But we've actually, when we were living overseas, had some of these rugs that they were individually, they were individually tied and knotted and woven by hand. And so they were, very, very high quality things, but those came from Persia or Iran and other parts of the Middle East. So I just think it's kind of interesting that they still the same area, same people groups have the same skills 2,500 years later. So going ahead, and again, if anybody has anything to say, you can just jump in there and comment. The ships of Tarshish serve as carriers for your wares. So you were filled and heavily loaded in the heart of the seas. Your rowers have brought you into great waters, but the eastern wind will break you in the heart of the seas. Your riches, your wares, your merchandise, your sailors and your pilots, your caulkers, the people, the traders of your merchandise, all your men of war that are in you, with all your company in your midst, will fall into the heart of the seas on the day of your downfall. So God here revealed that this great ship of Tyre, it's this huge commercial empire, was headed for a shipwreck. And ships from Tarshish, probably Spain, they carried a lot of Tyre's merchandise. Okay, remember, Tyre was physically the not that large of a place. It was a city state. But Tyre became very rich because of all of this sea trade. And Tyre's merchants had brought her ship of commerce into great waters. They just kept expanding and expanding. But, and it says, but then you're going to run into an eastern wind. Okay, what's an east wind that's going to break it up? Well, that's going to be Babylon. And so because of that, all of the people that contributed to the success of Tyre's enterprise would fall into this chaotic sea that was being orchestrated by God. And when he overthrows this ship of state, a ship of economy, ship of commerce. So and so basically it goes to show you that any ship can be sunk by the master of the seas. No ship is the people that owned the Titanic made the mistake of saying it's the ship not even God could sink. And so we know how that ended on their maiden voyage. Of course, the Titanic sunk with the loss of hundreds and hundreds of lives. So going ahead, everybody that participated with Tyre was going to be affected one way or the other. Their mercenary army would also be destroyed because they would be utterly wiped out by Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 28, at the sound of the cry of your pilots, the countryside will shake. All the oarsmen, the sailors, and all the mariners of the sea will come down from their ships to stand on the ground. They will raise their voices over you and cry bitterly. They will throw up dust on their heads. They will roll themselves in ashes. They will shave themselves bald for you and put on sackcloth. They will weep for you with a bitter soul, with bitter lament. So the cry of the Tyrians, when destruction came, would cause all of her merchants and trading partners and people that just were onlookers to cry and mourn, because it was even though maybe they were not from Tyre, they benefited and they profited from the commerce that was Tyre. And so when they saw all of this stuff falling apart, then they would also they would see their fortunes just disappearing in front of their eyes. It would be, I guess, equivalent to somebody who invested in things. Well, like a few years ago, people that invested in Enron, and boy, they were making money hand over fist, but it was all based on fraudulent investment stuff. And so when that went down, boy, it brought a lot of people down with them. And Houston, lots and lots of people were, they lost their entire life savings because Enron was such a big deal that they poured everything they had into this one company. And then when it went bankrupt, I personally knew people that had been quite wealthy and that had bought into the Enron myth and so forth. And so when it was all over with, they had nothing. And that's what happened with these people that had thrown everything that they had into Tyre. And then it was nothing, because once Nebuchadnezzar came in and destroyed their land base, that reduced the effectiveness of Tyre greatly. And then later on, when Alexander the Great came through, we talked about it last week, he came through and was able to actually defeat the island of Tyre. That was the end of Tyre as they knew it back then. It never, ever again regained its prominence in the world. In fact, it was many years before there were even people living there. So going ahead, in their wailing, they will take up a lament for you. They will mourn for you, over you. Who was like Tyre, silenced in the midst of the sea? When your merchandise came out of the sea, you satisfied many people. With the abundance of your wealth and all your wares, you enriched the kings of the earth. Now you are shattered by the seas in the depths of the waters. Your merchandise and all the company and all your company have fallen in your midst. And so they would lament the demise of this great commercial empire, which they'd regarded as the world's mightiest economic power. There was never ever anything like that on earth before this time. And so here we have a lamentation within a lamentation. Tyre had satisfied the materialistic desires of many nations and kings, and the onlookers would wail because Tyre's ship had sunk. And so now, everyone's fortunes were so wound up in Tyre. Their entire fortunes were in Tyre. Okay, last couple of verses here. All the inhabitants of the coastlands are appalled at you. Their kings are horribly afraid. Their faces are convulsed. The merchants among the people hiss at you. You have become a horror and will be no more. So with Tyre's trading partners, it says they would stand appalled at her, and the kings would fear for the prosperity of their own kingdoms, certainly because they were so wrapped up in it. And as a result of Tyre's fall, then their own economies could also suffer and fall. And other merchants would just kind of, it says, whistle in amazement at the unbelievable collapse of Tyre. It was one of those things that they said, it's just too big to fail. And people just couldn't imagine it. And it would just terrorize them, terrify them, that now what are we going to do? I think a similar thing would be the stock market failures of 1929, where so many people lost fortunes overnight. Then they would say, well, now what do I do? What am I going to do now? And so a lot of them ended up jumping off of a tall building in a single bound, and it ended that part of their life. Not a good solution to losing all your money. So the record of Tyre I think it has particular relevance for our day, and for those areas in which she excelled, and she was the envy of the entire world. Those are the things that they did. Okay, it was ancient commerce, but the things that they did are exactly the things that modern nations today strive to do. They like buy and sell, buy low, sell high, and outdo the neighbor or your competitors. And so those things, it just looks just like a picture of today, like Pat was talking about with New York and the World Trade Center. All of those buildings, the doors they would have on there, the plaques of the nations that they came from, And so many of those companies and nations failed after 9/11. So, Tyre has a message for us today. And it's that riches without God are unable to satisfy the heart of man and often keep many from dependence on God. That's why Yeshua said it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than it would be for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And so, so sometimes I think even within the body of Messiah, the believers in whatever denomination it could be, that kind of same spirit has invaded the body of Messiah to the point that it's kind of a competition, and I've seen this firsthand with pastors that they can't hardly, they're in the same denomination, in the same group, and they can't hardly even talk to each other because of the jealousy of one guy getting a bigger congregation than the other guy and getting more recognition. And he's got a radio station. Well, I got a TV station. Well, I got a podcast. Well, yeah, I've got, and they just go on and on and on. And so we see that creeping into our own lives sometimes if we're not real careful. So the idea of it is to seek the kingdom of God first, and all that other stuff will come to you. And so then we wouldn't be devastated by the fall of Tyre. All right, so that is all I have for tonight. And we'll just open it up to comments or questions.